I promise you, these PC Engine games will eventually get less confusing. The Kung Fu is Volume 1 of Hudson's games, and despite that, it's the first post-launch game, coming 3 weeks after the system came out. The reason why it's Volume 1 is because at the big system debut event in early October, they discovered that the entire production run used the development code. For the consumer version of the PC Engine, you have to use some initialization routines that aren't required for the development hardware. So on stage, 2 weeks before the system launched, Hudson's big technological showpiece game failed. Hudson had to redo the entire run of the game, but you can still find copies of that first run. They all have holes punched in them, and were used in store demo kiosks. The Kung Fu is the first PC Engine game that we've seen to get a release outside of Japan, though for obvious reasons, the title was changed to China Warrior. That title screen is the only difference between the two releases. The reason that the title changed in the US was to avoid confusion with Nintendo's Kung Fu, which was really Irem's Kung Fu. But in Japan it was called Spartan X, until the license expired and Nintendo re-released the game in Japan as Kung Fu. And it definitely doesn't help that there is another game called The Kung Fu, though that one's for the PlayStation 2. At least Hudson's The Kung Fu is clearly based on Bruce Lee, while everybody else's Kung Fu or The Kung Fu is based on Jackie Chan. I mean, it would get more annoying if Jackie Chan just showed up in The Kung Fu. Oh no. Adding to this whole mess is how Hudson's The Kung Fu is transparently based on Irem's Kung Fu. In The Kung Fu, you control Wang, a martial arts master out to defeat Ankok Taite, or the Dark Emperor. And with a name like that, you know he needs a punch to the face. Wang marches to the right through 4 environments, punching and kicking anything that gets in his way. Button 1 punches, button 2 kicks. You can hit down to duck, and when you're ducking, you can only punch, and when you jump by pressing up, you can only kick. Something you're going to notice very quickly while watching this footage is that there is only one variety of enemies in the Kung Fu. Those hooded guys who barely have any animation. They don't even grapple you when they touch you, they just charge right through. They do come in 3 different colors. The most common ones are the gray ones that just walk in a straight line. The green ones will duck when you attack them, so you have to hit them again when they stand up. And then the orange ones take 3 hits to defeat. The real threats are all of the obstacles that are getting thrown at you from off screen. These come in an enormous variety, and you'll have to either dodge or hit them. And you will want to hit them because some of them contain power-ups. Though there's only one power-up in the game, and that's more health. You don't actually start with a full health bar. Instead, it's actually at 50%, and gaining health past the end of the gauge will turn the bar gold and probably show you a lot fewer health points. So you run through the gold health first, then get a full silver gauge, and then die when you run out of that. One important flying object to keep an eye out for is the box of oolong tea, because kicking that restores the largest amount of health. One big problem with taking out the various obstacles is that where your blows land isn't really where they land. There's a general cloud around your fist or the end of your foot, and it's not symmetrical. While it goes a little bit above the contact point, it actually goes more below it than above it. And the size of this contact point isn't consistent. A kick while walking forward has a different size contact point than a kick while standing still, and those are different from the contact points when you're jump kicking. What all of this comes down to is that it's not very clear what will hit what, and you're just going to have to try to see if you can hit something. In the first part of every stage, you're constantly walking forward unless you crouch. Then you stop in place. This is an important thing to know for avoiding a lot of flying obstacles. At the end of every stage, there's a boss. And here the controls change up a little bit for the one-on-one battle. You're still punching and kicking, But if you press punch or kick at the exact same moment that the boss throws a punch or kick, then you'll block their attack. Also, there's a few super-ish moves. These are activated in response to you getting hit. Get hit twice in rapid succession, and then your next punch will be a super blow. There's two usable strategies against the bosses. The stick and move method, where you approach, get your blow in, and then back away before they counter. Or you can drive them into a corner and beat them down mercilessly. That doesn't work on all bosses, but it works often enough. There's only 5 different bosses, and everyone except for the Dark Emperor, who is definitely not what you'd expect, get reused with palette swaps. In fact, one set of those bosses is just your sprite palette swapped, so it doesn't really feel like that one should count. At the end of the first 3 areas, you'll go to a bonus stage after defeating the boss, and here you just want to strike the vase with maximum power. The harder you hit, the more points you get, and of course, points will earn you extra lives. If you manage to beat the Dark Emperor, then you can start a second loop, and naturally this will be a bit more difficult. If you manage to complete 3 loops of the game, then you get the actual ending. And by actual ending, I mean if you try to start a 4th loop, the game just comes back with a text screen telling you to give up. The standout thing in The Kung Fu are the graphics. The giant sprites for the characters are a standout, even if they can't turn around. You'll note that Wang gets progressively bloodier the more he gets beat up. The first stage also features parallax scrolling, a first on the PC Engine, and it's the visual technique that will become what the system is known for. You start out with 3 lives, and of course if you lose those it's game over. If you want to continue, you have to use a cheat code, holding down button 1, 2, and down, then pressing run. You can only continue 3 times though. However, there's also a debug menu. If you follow these commands, then you can choose what stage you want to start at, how many lives you'll get, and if you or the enemies will be invincible. While Kung Fu definitely has fans in Japan, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of them. Those who think fondly of it mainly point to it as being a showcase for the PC Engine, while everyone else goes, yeah, but it's no fun to play. And I definitely fall in that later camp. I'm not going to say this is my least favorite game of the first year of the PC Engine's life, because there's a couple genres coming up that I really hate, but I don't think there's an action game in the early days of the PC Engine that I like less than this. It's a perfect example of the doom that comes to the graphical showcase game. A pattern that's been repeated dozens of times over the decade, where you have a very pretty game made for the newest hardware, and people fawn over it upon release, but it plays like garbage, and over time, the thing that people remember is that it's a bad game.